my topic is the future of AI and machine learning and its impact on various sectors. So I'll initially start off by diving into an overview of what AI is and some of its components, and then I'll move on to where it's applied and other topic areas. So taken from a definition, artificial intelligence leverages computers and machines to mimic problem-solving and decision-making capabilities of the human mind. It's important to note that AI in itself doesn't really make sense, as it's basically an umbrella term that encompasses various components to create intelligent machines. Simply put, mentioning AI doesn't really provide us with a clear idea of how machines are actually being made intelligent or how they can mimic human responses. To do so, we must understand the concept of machine learning. So these two terms are actually closely related concepts, but it's important to note that they're not interchangeable terms. And as we can see on the image on the right, AI includes various subfields, including machine learning and deep learning. So machine learning in itself is a specific approach to AI that involves the use of various algorithms and statistical type of models, depending on what we actually want out as a result. So essentially what happens is a large amount of data is fed into the machine, and the model almost acts as a type of framework for analyzing the data and applying specific algorithms to the machine that allow it to identify patterns in the data and also to improve its performance over time. So basically, in other words, it allows computers to learn without explicitly being programmed to do so. And then we have deep learning, which is a further subset of AI and a subset of machine learning that involves the use of artificial neural networks. So I'm not going to cover it into too much detail. It's quite a complex subject, but it's basically modeled after the structure of the human brain. And what it does is it enables machines to recognize patterns and make certain type of decisions and respond to certain situations, similarly to in a way that a human would. Moving on, we actually have one of our most popular tests known to this day for determining whether a computer is capable of thinking and responding like a human, and this is the Turing Test. It was named after Alan Turing, who basically proposed that a computer can be said to possess artificial intelligence if it can mimic human responses under certain conditions. So simply explained, we can see in the bottom left image over there, the test requires three entities. We have terminal A, which is a human and functions as a questioner, while the other terminals functions as the respondents, with one being human and the other being a machine. And the questioner's goal is basically to interrogate both of the respondents and determine which of them is a human and which is the computer. So the test is repeated multiple times, and if the questioner guesses that one of the subjects is human, that the machine is human more than the actual human itself, it's regarded to have artificial intelligence. And there's many different types of variations of this test, but I believe this is the most common. And it's also important to note that this test is still considered relevant today, but there are still some limitations to it. One of these criticisms being that a 5-minute keyboard conversation might not really be sufficient enough to judge its intelligence. And the other being that although it may actually pass the test, it doesn't necessarily mean that the machine itself is intelligent, as it may produce an output, but it might not actually understand what it is saying or the meaning of it. And yeah, just a cool example that I found was in 2018, Google Duplex actually successfully made a hair appointment with a hairdresser over the phone in front of a crowd of around 7,000 people, and the receptionist was completely unaware that they weren't conversing with a real human. So moving on. So humans have understood this concept of AI for a long time now, and we all knew that it might be possible, but what was actually stopping us from doing it? What were we missing? So Andy Chan, a product manager at an artificial intelligence company that builds software and algorithms for Fortune 500 companies, talks about this interesting concept called the false start. And basically what Chan mentions is that there were three barriers to the progression of AI. First, and the most obvious, I guess we would all say, was the limited computing power available at the time. So the early computers that were used to develop AI algorithms were much less powerful than the computers that we have available today, which ultimately limited the complexity and size of the AI models. And another major obstacle, which I found to be quite interesting, was actually the lack of understanding of how the human brain works. So going back to the concept of deep learning and neural networks, the understanding of the human brain actually plays an important role in the structure of how AI can perceive and create intelligent responses from data. And then finally, we have a lack of access to large data sets necessary for training AI algorithms. So without the access to a vast amount of data, it makes it challenging to accurately recognize patterns and make accurate predictions. But now with the rapid development of technology and specifically the access to cloud storage such as AWS and Azure, all of this has now become a lot more possible. So moving on, as we previously just discussed, now that AI has come to the fore, I believe there'll be a lot of significant changes that AI will bring as to how companies provide their services and internal processes. And here are a look at some of them. So firstly, we have the financial services sector. So AI has emerged as a widely used tool in the financial services sector, specifically with the three main goals of automating tasks, decision-making, and enhancing customer experience. So why the financial services sector? Well, it's particularly an ideal environment for AI to flourish because of its tools that allow for analysis of large data sets, specifically since we're living in this data-driven world right now. A particular example that we can look at that I found was quite interesting is actually fraud detection. So fraud has always been quite a big issue in the sector. And with the development of AI, we're actually now able to detect anomalies that may indicate fraudulent behavior with the use of machine learning algorithms. And this can basically be done by looking at historical transaction data from what a person has bought and how we perceive normal behavior. And that goes same as what we think looks suspicious. But not only this, it can also continuously learn from new data and adjust the algorithms accordingly and make them more effective at maybe detecting new and emerging types of fraud. So another sector is the healthcare industry. And in a sense, I believe this actually become one of the most important areas for the involvement of AI and machine learning through the use of vast amounts of data that we can actually use to treat patients. And one of the impacts that we're seeing is the role of AI plays in assisting our healthcare workers, particularly in decision-making. And one of the examples that I found was the integration of AI in medical imaging, such as X-rays and MRI scans. So these algorithms can actually analyze the images and not only help detect abnormalities, but that have been overlooked by humans, but can also actually provide a detailed assessment of a patient's health, which I thought was pretty crazy. And moving on to the best and most important sector, in my opinion, the technology sector, as I believe a lot of this wouldn't be possible without us. So similarly to the other sectors, efficiency is again a key focus in which we see of the introduction of these new tools. We now have machine learning programs that can do code analysis for us, self-testing, and even help us identify bugs in our code. An example, which I'm pretty sure we're all very familiar with, is ChatGPT. And in short, it's a natural language processing tool that can answer questions, generate text, and engage in conversations. And most importantly, can even generate code to some extent. So it's basically tools like ChatGPT that have optimized the technology sector, especially in software development. So for me, not only has it become a personal tutor that can assist you with niche problems, but it's also created this sense of optimization where, in a sense, you can now find your solutions, immediately instead of having to spend quite a few days researching to find out what the bug was in your code. So with all this rapid development of AI and efficiencies that replace the need for physical human interference, it pretty much leaves us with a question: what does this actually mean for us? So I'm not sure if it's just me, but recently AI-related posts have completely taken over my social media with the recent release of ChatGPT 4. And it feels like there's so many questions floating around about the opportunities and the concerns that it's bringing. So by now, it's become pretty obvious that quite a few people are worried about this massive wave of automation and what does it actually mean for us humans? And it's clear some roles have been made redundant. For example, basic data entry, customer service representatives, bookkeeping, and even low-level accounting roles. But even though some of these jobs have been made redundant, there's also a wave of new jobs being created, particularly in the tech space. For example, we now have roles like AI trainers, new data science type of roles, skills that involve capabilities in computational intelligence and machine learning. And an important one that I found that's not to be forgotten is PwC also estimates that the healthcare industry will be in desperate need for AI-assisted healthcare technicians, which I believe is to do with robotics now playing a major role in healthcare. So looking back at some of the few examples that I've just covered, it's pretty clear that in today's world, AI is playing a very important role in assisting us, whether it's making better decisions or doing repetitive tasks at a greater speed that we can. But in my opinion, I believe it's not a case of AI that's going to be directly replacing the human workforce, but more on how we'll actually utilize it and work alongside it to improve efficiencies. In other words, this term that I found called collaborative intelligence. And although AI is developing quite rapidly, it's surprisingly unlikely to fully replace certain jobs such as accounting and software engineering, which I thought was quite strange initially. But it's due to the unique skills and the human judgments and creativity that humans bring to the table that actually makes this possible. And lastly, I think the key takeaway from this is that we're simply going to see a massive need to reskill and upskill the human workforce, as AI is probably going to get more involved in our day-to-day tasks and change how we go about doing things for most jobs. And lastly, I just want to say thanks. And there's a friendly reassurance from ChatGPT with a question, will developers be replaced by ChatGPT? And ChatGPT doesn't think so, at least not in the near future.